Do the Wisconsin Badgers have one of the great historical offenses in college football history that nobody really talks about? I want to talk about that and more on a fun episode of today's Locked On Badgers. Let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, fam? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. I'm your host, Ryan Herrings, as always. Really do appreciate everybody tuning in. As always, y'all are the best. One of the fun things with doing this Locked On show is sometimes I just get to do fun things that are always rattling around in my brain, that have been rattling around in my Badger brain for a long time. And one of those things is the 2011 Wisconsin Badgers team, specifically that offense. Nobody really talks about it. It's one of the great offenses in college football history from a talent standpoint. And I think it's just fun to talk about that kind of stuff. I did a show previously about Melvin Gordon having what I consider the second greatest running back season, and one that you could argue is almost as good as Barry Sanders' season of all time. And nobody acknowledges it. Nobody talks about it. The fact that he got skunked in the Heisman voting remains one of the great heists in the history of modern mankind. And this 2011 Badgers offense, nobody really talks about it because that team lost 3 games. Thank you, Bielema. It lost 3 games, and it's Wisconsin, and it was kind of a one-off, but it's one of the great collections of offensive talent that college football has ever seen. And I stand by that. Now, people will say, well, look at some of the LSU teams with Joe Burrow. Look at some of the Ohio State teams. I'm not talking the entire roster that has 17 4-star receivers, right? I'm talking the players that actually played. The 11, 12, 13, 14 players that actually played. Let's just talk about how freaking talented that 2011 offense was, how incredibly unique, how celebrated it should be. I mean, there should be, 20 years from now, I'm going to be sitting around a campfire telling people, young college football fans, that I saw that 2011 Wisconsin offense. So good. Let's talk about it. So Russell Wilson, right, obviously, 3rd round pick. The running backs, James White, 4th round pick. Montee 2nd round pick. Melvin Gordon was on that team and got touches. Now, not a big cog, but he was a 1st round pick. The receivers, Jared Abbrederis, 5th round pick. Nick Toon, 4th round pick. Are you sensing a trend here? The offensive line, Ricky Wagner, 5th round pick. Travis Frederick, 1st rounder. Peter Kahn, 2nd rounder. Kevin Zeitler, 1st rounder. And then you have, Brady Ewing, the fullback. 5th round pick. He was a fullback, for gosh sake. That's how insanely talented that offense was. The fullback got drafted, right? And then you have just a couple other players who didn't get drafted who played. Josh Oglesby, well, he was an undrafted free agent. The Redskins signed him. You have Jacob Pedersen, who was a really good tight end. He was signed by the Falcons. Jake Byrne was signed by, I think, the San Diego Chargers. You have, what is that? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That's 10 NFL draft picks off that roster plus 3 undrafted free agents. Every single dude who lined up on that roster got drafted on offense or was a free agent signee. Ryan Groy played, and he was as the 6th lineman. He was incredible, this big athletic 6th guy. That entire offense got drafted, y'all. How rare is that? Let's go back, and I'm going to do this at some point. I should have done this before the show, but let's go back and look at some of those great LSU teams that put up 50-something with Joe Burrow. You're telling me every single player on that team either got drafted, that played a reasonable role, got drafted, or was a 1st round, or was an undrafted free agent? Like that Wisconsin team was so loaded. And I may not be, some Badger fans may be like, yeah, I get it. Why are we talking about this? It's because sometimes it's just fun to rehash things as a fan, to go back and talk about it. And I'm going to do, at some point this offseason, I'm going to stack up this roster with some of the all-time great college football teams. And we're going to have legitimate discussions on what is the greatest college football offense from a talent perspective of the last 15, 20 years. Because this team could have put up much bigger numbers. People are going to look at the raw numbers of some of the LSU teams, Ohio State teams. This Wisconsin team didn't do that. It's because they ran a ton. They had a bunch of blowouts, right? They didn't air it out as much as they could have. With this Russell Wilson team and the 2 NFL receivers, James White, Montee Ball, 4 draft picks on the offensive line, a 5th round fullback, this team could have put up 50 points a game if they wanted to. Some games they just didn't need to. And then also, if you look at the return game, you had a great kicker, Welch. You had a great punter, Nortman. Abbrederis was one of the best punt returners in the country. That was another offensive weapon you had. Just an insane group. And that offensive line, 2 first-round picks and a second-round pick, that's absolutely insane. Obviously, on the outside, you had Nick Toon, the big possession receiver, Jared Abbrederis, who nobody could cover, a great route runner. You had an incredible 1-2 punch with Montee Ball and James White. Montee Ball had 39 touchdowns that year. I mean, that number doesn't even make sense. 39 total touchdowns, 33 rushing and six receiving. That doesn't even make sense. How do you get 39 touchdowns in a season while sharing the backfield with James White and a quarterback that's still going to pitch it around to Abbrederis and Toon and Pedersen? It doesn't compute. I brought this up. One of the reasons I want to talk about this and just have fun with it a little bit, and this is just going to be a short show. This is just fan talk right now. One of the reasons I want to talk about this is I brought this up to a buddy of mine who's an SEC guy. And I was like, yeah, one of the great offenses nobody talks about is that 2011 Badgers team. He's like, stop it. Just stop it. You're biased. You're a homer. And yes, I'm both of those things. But it's also people just don't realize how talented that team was because it was kind of a one-off, because there wasn't a trend, because it's Wisconsin, because they lost 3 games. That team was just loaded for bear, and it deserved better. And that was one of our lost chances, right? As a sports fan, you whatever program you're a fan of, right? Whatever franchise you're a fan of, whatever organization, you can always point to 2 or 3 years which were the lost years, right? The years where you should have fought for a national title that year, but this one thing happened. We should have been one of the top 2 or 3 teams in the country that year, but this one thing happened. We're going to talk about that one thing next on Locked On Badgers, plus a couple other really interesting takeaways when I look back at this team on a fun Locked On Badgers. But first, today's show brought to you by our good friends over at that Built Bar. I've talked about Built Bar a lot. They are my favorite protein bar, one of the best protein bars on the market, 100% real chocolate, and unbelievable flavors. I love the churro. I keep trying to get people to try it. That's my go-to. It's delectable. It's chewy. It's tasty. Lots of protein, 100% real chocolate. I don't know how they do it. My kids like it. It tastes like a candy bar to them, so they sneak. Not every flavor, but they really like the churro. They like the cookies and cream. There's a couple other flavors they like, and they have flavors for everybody. If you go to their website, you're going to see all the incredible stuff that Built Bar has going on. And now you don't need to wait to get it shipped to you. You can go to Walmart, get your 4-bar box in the pharmacy aisle, 13-bar variety box at Sam's Club. Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar on the planet. You will thank me later. Again, I want to just say thank you to everybody tuning in. If you like the content, you like the show, if you're with us, if you're one of the everydayers, you saw the interview with Rufus Ferguson II yesterday and his dad. That thing was awesome. Those guys are incredible. Really enjoyed that. If you're with us every day, thank you so much. If you like the show, please hit that subscribe button. Help us grow. It means the absolute world to me. And we have a bunch of amazing ideas that I want to roll out this summer. So I can't wait to do that and continue just building this Badger community, because that's what we're all about here. All right, let's keep talking about the 2011 Wisconsin Badgers offense, that team, and what I consider just a lost year. Let's go to the one moment I talked about, the derailment of that season, the Michigan State game, the first one, the Hail Mary. And to me, that was it. That was because they lost the following game against Ohio State. And I am firmly convinced that was a hangover effect, right? They lost to Ohio State because they lost to Michigan State. I think if they had beat Michigan State, they would have rolled Ohio State. They would have won the rest of their games. And we're talking about an undefeated Wisconsin Badgers team that's going to be playing for a national title game. Nothing will ever change my opinion about that. They won the rest of their games, and the only reason they lost to Ohio State was because of a Hail Mary. And the only reason they lost the Michigan State game was because of that garbage Hail Mary from Kirk Cousins that bounced around. And that play, if you go back and look at it, and you know what, let's do it live here. If you're watching on YouTube, let's just pull it up. Because that play, there is so much nonsense there. So many little things had to happen, had to go right, had to go wrong. And there's still a couple lasting images of that for me that will always stick out. The first one of which is, again, Bielema. It's not all on Bielema, but you have Chris Borland, who is an incredible defender. He's your most impactful defender. He's just in the middle of field on this play doing nothing. You rush 3, so you get no real pressure on Cousins. You have, for some reason, Chris Borland at like the 30-yard line defending absolutely nothing. It still drives me nuts. Here, let's pull this up here. Listen, people are going to say, I want to see that nonsense. That was an awful play. It was horrible. Why are you making us watch this again? Listen, we're fans together. We share in happiness and pain together. That's what this is all about. That's why we're fans. And if you're watching this, you're a Wisconsin fan, and we can commiserate over the pain of this and the ridiculousness of this play together. This right here is the reason we didn't play for a national title that year. I'm firmly convinced of that. Obviously, it's 31-31. Here comes the Hail Mary. Let's keep going here. Wisconsin's a better team than Michigan State. They would have won this game. And again, the three-man rush. There's Chris Borland right in the middle there. If you're watching on the pod, if you're listening on the podcast, I apologize, but he has Chris Borland in the middle field. Obviously, you have Jared Everderis on the back end. Mistimes the jump. Bounces around and touchdown. And again, I think he got across the goal line, but let's also point out the fact that there is no replay angle that definitively shows that the call in the field was down at the 1 yard line. They overturned it in a bunch of BS just because that's not how replay is written. You need conclusive video evidence. It was overturned anyway, and I'm firmly convinced it's because it was a road game. If that was a home game in Madison, those refs are not overturning that because they would have not gotten out of the stadium alive. They overturned it because they wanted to get out of the stadium alive. Unbelievable. The greatest collection of offensive talent, one of the greatest collections of offensive talent playing at the same time in the last 20 years in the Big Ten, derailed by a fluke Hail Mary in East Lansing with your best defender just hanging out in the middle of the field off a deflected ball that replay overturned without conclusive video evidence. Yeah. Is it less painful over time? Not really for me. As you can tell, that thing still occupies headspace. Anyway, let's continue just talking a little bit more about this unbelievable team. And this is going to be a short show. Again, I think it's fun just to take some of these jaunts down memory lane occasionally. A couple of other things that will always stick out to me about this team and that season. The fact that Mike Taylor and Chris Borland combined for almost 300 total tackles is that more or less mind-blowing than Montee Ball's 39 touchdowns? Badger fans, let me know in the comments. Mike Taylor had 150 tackles that year, total tackles. Chris Borland had 143. I'm going to dive into this. When was the last time a team had two linebackers each with over 140 total tackles? I mean, is that more incredulous than Montee Ball's 39 touchdowns? Absolutely insane. The rest of the team, there was no playmakers on that defensive line. We just had no great speed in the secondary outside of us. Desmond Southward was on that team, I believe. But Borland and Taylor in the middle, incredible. The Michigan State Hail Mary cost us a chance at a title. Montee Ball had 39 touchdowns. Again, 9-10 draft picks off that offense. The other thing that's interesting, if you go back, so that offense, right, we talked about it. 3 first-rounders, a couple second-rounders, a third-rounder, fourth-rounder, 3 fifth-rounders. We're tabulating up these NFL draft picks off that offense. None of those dudes are 6th or 7th rounders even, right? There's first-rounders, second-rounders, third-rounders. That team was so loaded, unbelievably loaded for bear. And if you look at the last 9 years of drafts, the last 9-10 years of Badger drafts, we've had 11 offensive players picked. That's how many was on that team. That's how many were picked literally off that team. We just in the last decade or so have finally matched that tally. And it just tells you, how we've needed to upgrade our offensive recruiting, right? We can't have, over the course of 10 years, 11 offensive players picked. That's not good enough. But it also tells you just how special that group was, how it should be remembered more fondly. I think it would be if we didn't drop those 3 games. People would look back at that 2011 offense and really enshrine it as one of the greats to ever grace the gridiron. Because that's what it is. You're not going to find almost any college football teams that are going to line up with a unit that gets every player drafted or signed to an NFL contract. Again, we're not talking about guys that in 3 years are going to be playing. The people that saw the field that year, every one of them was an NFL dude. It's absolutely insane. Absolutely incredible. And we should talk about it more. Anyway, that's today's show, Locked On Badgers. I hope you appreciated the trip down memory lane. I hope you liked the interview we did yesterday with Rufus Ferguson II and his dad. Incredible interview. Really, really enjoyed it. More content coming up next week. As always, on Wisconsin. Thank you so much for tuning in, and let's go Badgers.